I was always like, well, I know what I want and I have my ideas about what life is supposed to be and who I'm here to be with and what it needs to look like. And I feel like God Universe was like, how has that worked out for you? Check your track record, have a seat, and pull back on all the external validation, all the external interaction, and come home. Hello, my love. Thank you so much for tuning into the podcast here on YouTube. I am going to ask you to take just a moment before enjoying this episode and go and hit the subscribe button. It not only helps the show, but it helps the channel. And I only want to continue to bring you incredible content and beautiful video content here on the YouTube. So just take a moment before enjoying the episode and hit subscribe. Thank you. Hello, my gorgeous. Welcome to another episode of Natalia Benson, the podcast. It is so great to be back with you. Welcome to the episode today. How are you? Quick little life update for you. If you haven't heard, I am moving back to Los Angeles. So by the time this airs, I will have already been moved. I'll be living on the west side of LA. Kind of wild. I was not expecting that whatsoever. Let's see, quick little story, but the day before my divorce was final, it was a pretty emotional day for me. And I went to the beach and I just sat on the sand and the sun had already gone down. And I was talking to the universe, I say God Universe. That's the way I like to say it. I was talking to God Universe and I just said, okay, God Universe, God for short, uni for short. I'm like, just guide my life. I'm like, am I meant to stay in Laguna? Am I meant to stay in my apartment? Like, where do you want me? What do you want me to be doing? Because even though I know that my ex and I were very ready for the finalization of our relationship. It's like when it's final, according to the state, it was still very emotional for me, just feeling like, holy crap, what a journey. All the decisions I made, everything that led to that moment. And I was just like on my knees on the sand. And I was just like, guide me. And I'm listening. And I'll tell you what, the moment before I was proposed to, I was feeling very anxious that day. And I remember standing on the beach looking up at the sun. It was behind the clouds and it had this really unique configuration. And I was talking to God in my head and I was like, please guide my life. And then I turned around and my, then fiance or boyfriend was on his knee proposing to me. And I've had significant moments after moments like that where I face west. Supposedly west in feng shui is my spiritual direction. That's what I've learned. And I will tell you, when I face west and I ask a question, things happen. I could be anywhere and ask a question of the universe and things are going to happen. So essentially on the day of my divorce being final, I commissioned my really dear friend Elliot Hans to do a painting for me. And I said, I want this painting to go across from my bed. And I want it to embody what my partnership, what I'm looking for and seeking in partnership. I want it to embody that. And he delivered it, was finished with it the day that my divorce was final. And he brought it to my apartment here in Laguna. I'm still here when I'm recording this. So brings it to me and he said, I pulled tarot cards for you to get inspired. And I pulled the Lovers and he's like, I'm not joking. So he's like, I pulled the Lovers. And so he put the number 6 at the top of the painting in Roman numerals, because in the major arcana, the Lovers, that's the Roman numeral at the top of the card. And the 6th major arcana in the tarot is the Lovers. So I took note And then a couple days later, I wrote to my property company and I was like, hey, I'd like to continue. Can you guys let me know what's going on? Because it was like a week before Christmas. And then they emailed me the next day and just said, we're not moving forward and you have until this date, basically. So I shattered like to the ground because I love my apartment. I was telling my mom like a week before, I was literally like, Mom, this is my favorite apartment that I've ever lived in. It's very small. It's 600 square feet, but I have a view of the ocean and I love it here. But I'm very cozy here. And I've also done a lot of grieving in here, which I'm going to back up and get into the episode in a minute, all about dating after divorce. This is going to be, my armpits already sweating thinking about talking about all this, but good lessons that have come through for me. But anyhow, it's interesting because I essentially, when I found that out, like I said, I was shattered. But what's interesting is that right before, I hadn't checked my email that morning and I was sitting down journaling and I was writing my vision and my values for future partnerships. So I will talk about that and what that process was for me. But I sat down and wrote for about an hour of just like, what is my vision for a relationship? What have I learned and metabolized over my I've had a very interesting dating history, especially living in Los Angeles when I was in my 20s. I've only had one significant relationship, and that I would say is with my ex-husband. We were together for 6 years. Is the longest I've ever been with anyone in my life. My longest relationship before that was more when I was younger. And I think 2 years was that was about as far as I would go. But anyways, I'm digressing. So just sticking to the magic of what I'm sharing with you. But essentially what happened is I noticed that the number on the top of the painting was the number 6. And I went forth and started looking for apartments. And I thought I was going to just move somewhere else down here in Orange County. That's what I wanted. And I had already been intuiting and hearing from my guides and my inner and higher self that I would move closer to LA was what I kept hearing. And like Costa Mesa, Newport was more what I was thinking. Well, actually, when I really sat down and got working on it, I just couldn't find anything here in Orange County. Everything was either at the top of my budget or below my budget, and I'd be making all these concessions. I just couldn't figure out, and I couldn't find anything that really, really worked for me. So I started to look on the West Side, and long story very short, I found the perfect place for me. And what I realized after, a couple weeks, once I'd already signed the lease, paid the deposit, I realized that I was moving into, I won't give too much away, but let's just say that the number 6 was involved in the whole shebang with the apartment. And I just really took that as a sign of being like, holy moly, that is amazing. Because I had even been doing my tarot a couple weeks prior and I pulled the Tower card and I was like, oh crap. I was like, I don't like getting the Tower. And I was like, what is coming for me? And I was talking to a really dear friend of mine about it. And I was like, babe, I pulled the Tower card. I'm like, what do we think it is? And I was like, I just have to live into the answers. But I'll tell you what, that was a Tower moment for me. And I crashed out for 2 days. I actually realized that between my dad's death, my divorce, and then this, I didn't really let myself have crash outs over either of those two things, which probably isn't very healthy. I've definitely gone through crazy, intense grief, but I didn't really crash out and get like angry at God. I didn't really have a moment like that. But when I found out that I had to move, I just flipped out. It was really powerful. It was actually really wild to experience myself in that energy of just laying in bed. I mean, I was depressed for like about a day. Aries, we don't let ourselves stay in that for too long. At least this Aries doesn't, while still honoring my emotional process. Okay, so that's just a little life update for you. I'm going to get into this episode and but anyhow, I am excited to move back to Los Angeles. I'm really genuinely looking forward to it. It definitely makes sense. It feels very right-sized in this era of my life. And I'm just really trusting that this is the plan and it really aligns. And I genuinely feel excited. And I haven't been there in a long time. So maybe I'll have an episode where I talk a lot more about that because it's been a pretty profound journey just figuring out that that's what was about to happen and that I was literally about to move back to LA. So, okay, so let's get into this episode. Like I said, my armpits are sweating. Whenever I know I'm going to be a bit vulnerable, I'm not going to get too into the details simply because they, of course, involve other humans and not just me, but I want to take like the higher level, lessons from my dating with divorce. Yeah, dating with divorce sounds interesting. Dating after divorce, but I'm also going to be really transparent because especially for any woman who is going through this or considering divorce, maybe what I'm going to share can be helpful. And then we'll see how it is when I actually start to date because I am not dating now. I learned very quickly that I was not ready. And that was a really, really powerful lesson in and of itself, because initially I was just attempting to escape. And what I had to recognize is that I was really being in use of the people. I was using them to escape my grief. And that was like a really mature moment for me just to evolve and recognize that like my choices don't just affect me, like they involve other people. And I really learned a lot. So here's what I will say. I began dating way too fast after my separation. So ironically, and we were divorced on February 7th, but legally it takes the state of California 6 months from the time that you file your papers. So we were broken up and we were complete, but legally I was essentially married until the end of the year, which I have to say, just personal perspective, I think that having a cooling off period, I don't think that's safe in a lot of instances. Fortunately, me and my ex we're friends. We have a very respectful, cordial relationship. But I was thinking like, what if we didn't? Or what if I was in a dynamic where I could be in harm's way and you're telling me there's a 6-month cooling off period? Like that is bonkers. And I'll tell you what, I don't know if anyone has like legal speak or understands why that's part of California law. I would be very curious to understand from your perspective and what you know about it. But just my opinion and having the experience of it, I was pretty surprised when I heard that. I was like, wow, fortunately, again, this is a pretty easeful scenario as far as separations and divorce go, but like being tied to someone legally, like I just thought that was kind of nuts. But essentially, so this will be coming out to almost a year to the day that we broke up and that we decided to divorce one another and separate. And I will say, like I was just mentioning, and this is not easy for me to admit, but I moved way too quickly into dating. I really, as I mentioned, I just wanted to like get away from the overwhelming experience of all of a sudden being like, holy crap, I'm going to be alone again. But at the same time feeling this energy of, oh, I have a second chance to find someone who is better suited for me. However, that's all well and good, but moving into that process too quickly is like, that was not a wise decision. So I basically just jumped right back on the apps and I started going on dates. And as fun as it was to get ready and have my little glow up and like be all sexy and go on dates, because I don't know, for anyone who has been in a long-term relationship, and I will say that the dynamic that me and my ex were in towards the end, I mean, we were barely spending time together. Like, I actually remember not long before we ended our relationship, I remember being like, I haven't posted this person in like 6 months because we just don't really spend any time together. We would have thought that that was like a bit indicative, but there really were like long stretches of time where we just were not invested in the relationship, and we were not invested in spending time or doing things really very special together. So I will say there was the part of me when we were done where I was like, oh my gosh, like I love getting dressed. I love going out, like, and I love like doing this with my girlfriends and my besties, but it was just fun to feel that like zhuzh again. But then my emotions started getting involved really quickly. And one of my best friend's husbands really gave me some wise counsel. And he said, Natalia, you've just been a wife. He's like, you were just a wife to someone and a partner to someone for, multiple years. And now you're coming out into the dating space in Los Angeles and you are like meeting people where that's like, you're not going to move too quickly into that, but you're still in that mode of like feeling like safe with someone and feeling that consistency. And, you can't ask that of people too quickly. You have to like allow things to evolve over time. And I just really struggled initially because also having a Venus in Pisces, I'm like, okay, God, universe. I'm like, okay, soul. I'm like, next time, maybe like a Venus in Leo would be nice. Like, I'm such a lover and I'm very sensitive. And what I'm learning, which I'm going to get to my learnings because they're so badass. And I'm honest, genuinely proud of myself, honestly, because this is like evolving, I would say, the more wounded aspects of my Venus in Pisces. But when I first was dating and like out of my relationship and just going back into the dating scene, I was like, the Venus and Pisces, the moving really quickly, the emotional, like just getting into the weeds with people quite fast. I was like, okay, this is unhealthy behavior. It took me a couple months to really recognize that. But this is also, I will say, the gift of coming out of a relationship, and that relationship gave me a lot of space to heal, grow, and evolve as a woman, because I entered it when I was 31 and I left just shy of my 38th birthday. So like, about less than 2 months before my 38th birthday. And there's a lot of growth that happened for me as an individual, and also me in terms of relating to a partner and relating to a man, and just a lot of evolution that I think my soul really signed up for in this life to do. If you're standing at the edge of a major life, money, or business transition, and you know the next chapter requires a different level of support, this may be your moment to work with me one-to-one. There are 2 ways to do that. The first is my year-long total life transformation mentorship, a deeply supported journey where we work on your money, your vitality, and your visibility so the growth you create is embodied and sustainable. The second is my signature one-to-one money and business mentoring, focused strategic support to help you stabilize, grow, and lead your finances and business with clarity and confidence. Both are for women who value refinement and are ready to build a life and business with intention, time spaciousness, and depth. If you feel the call to work with me one-to-one, the application is waiting for you in the show notes. But what I will say is like that Venus and Pisces energy for me is like, I'll move so quickly and I'll just get into the romance part without discerning if someone really makes sense for me. And it was almost like touching a hot stove really, really fast and just being like, oh, I can move quickly and like I can date someone or I can get into a relationship, and very, very quickly seeing that was a terrible and unhealthy idea. So essentially, I did end up I think it was like early summer, I did end up meeting someone extremely special who I actually could have seen myself being with. And we were definitely moving in that direction. And I absolutely freaked out. And I just kept attempting to ignore myself and just be like, just move forward. You don't want to miss this opportunity. Like, this is a really incredible person. And if you miss out on this, you're going to be really disappointed. But my nervous system could not handle it. And we actually went out on like our 5th or 6th date, something like that. And I could not chill. I remember just sitting there and being like, oh my God, this is what it's like to be hypervigilant. Like, I didn't even necessarily understand that that's what was happening, but I just couldn't calm down. And for me, what I really came to recognize is like, that is because I was ignoring my deeper truth, which is like, I am not ready to step into the space to be available to another person. And I am coming from a very, very unhealthy place if I think that I can do that so fast after being in a relationship that was, especially towards the end, like it was like work, like we were putting in work, like you guys know the story, but it's like there was a lot of work involved and it was not easy. And my sweet being and my heart and my soul and my nervous system and my body were like, girl, what are you doing? And not to mention, me and this person, we ended up having a very conscious conversation and just, I'm telling you guys also the good parts. I definitely had some like very immature experiences too, where I was just like, I learned like to communicate in a healthier way, even though I think what I recognized in this stint with dating after my divorce, I was just like, oh my God, like I need to work on my communication style. And even in my relationship, I know that I broke trust, especially early on, because I just had a really unconscious communication style, especially if I was like angry or just like felt like I wasn't getting my needs met or there was fear. And it's really powerful, and not to blame my parents, but it's like just where you recognize from your family. I recognize from my family of origin where certain communication patterns come from and how those can so unconsciously come up, especially when I'm comfortable. And so I'm giving you like the high level, really great scenario that I was in, but I just am being transparent and letting you know that it was not all super conscious and super like mature. And I learned a lot in a really short period of time, because with a few of the people that I was seeing and involved with, they gave me feedback and they were just like, you need to like speak from where you are and you don't need to like assume. I would go into hypervigilance really fast because I was just like protecting myself at every turn. And sometimes that is okay, but hypervigilance is very, very unpleasant for me personally to be in. So I know moving forward that going at a slow pace and being in my discernment and really being clear and self-respecting in my choices is going to be very, very important for me, so that part of me, I don't need to activate her. She doesn't need to come out and protect me. And also, the way I see it as well. And then I'll finish up my first story and then we're moving on, because this is just so vulnerable for me to talk about. But I want to talk about more like the high level and some really cool stuff. And you guys are like, no, tell us everything. Tell us everything. But here's the thing, like what I will say is moving forward, the discernment piece and going slow, because I don't want to bring out that part of me that thinks she needs to protect. And the thought that I was just going to finish is like, I remember having a very clear memory in my 20s where I was like hooking up with someone, and we weren't exclusive, and he was older, a little older than me, and I really was into him, and he was very clear that he didn't want to be with me. And it was really, I was just like, that was very hurtful. And I just remember we were sitting at dinner together, and that hyper vigilant part of me was out, but it was just because I didn't feel safe. And I was choosing to be in a scenario with a person who I was very conscientious of was not choosing me. I think this was like 10 years ago. And I just remember that's really when that part started to come out. And it's interesting coming back into the dating world after being in a relationship for 6 years and just seeing how all of that, all those parts of me were like alive and well. And I really had to apply love and nourishment and maturity and a healing journey, which I'm still on, to really soothe. And I've done a lot of EMDR this year, that's for sure. We're going to talk about that, but just to really soothe and bring those parts of me like into present time versus functioning from these unconscious past parts. And that has just been wild. So the long story end of the short, whatever that saying is, long story short, is very simply, me and this person had a very conscious conversation, and it was very beautiful, but I literally apologized because I was like, I should have never, allowed this to like move forward over the last couple of months. I just didn't want to miss out on having this experience with you. And he was also so clear about what he was looking for. So I was like, oh, perfect. I was like, I love that clarity and having that leadership in, a man that you're dating is really like, it's attractive and it's impressive, and not a lot of men, I will say, in LA, from my experience, really lead with that. At least, again, not in my experience, but I'm genuinely excited when I am ready to date again, to be in the energy of the woman that I am now, and to date and to be in like the early days and stages with someone with all of the experience, the hurt, and the beauty under my belt, the relationship that I've been cultivating with myself. Okay, I'm jumping ahead. But after that ended, I was extremely disappointed, just because it was a very beautiful experience in certain ways. But I was like, I need to be respectful of not only this person, I need to be respectful of myself, because I'm not ready. I'm bananas to think that I'm at all equipped to step into another relationship and actually give the best parts of myself. Like, there's no way. Like, I wouldn't even be able to repair with someone if we had something, because it's almost like the cup was just so full, nothing could be, added. And I kind of had to figure that out the hard way, and then also involve myself with someone else to figure that out. And as I was saying, I apologized and just took accountability for just more so the selfishness, because a lot of my close friends and women in my life have been like, after I got divorced, I took a year to myself. And so it took me a second, but I did decide to take a page out of that book, because I just realized that's the healthy, well-adjusted thing to do, is to come back to who I am before even thinking of contributing to another person's life and getting involved with someone else. So essentially, the summer became my time to be alone. And I was, again, it was tough. Like I knew before the person that I was seeing, I knew that I wasn't ready, but I was almost like forcing myself to move forward, because again, like I said, I was in like that scarcity energy of like, this is not gonna, like, if this doesn't move forward, then like, I'm going to just be alone. And this was very unconscious. I was like, I'm going to have to deal with myself. And instead, I feel like God, universe, whatever word you like to use. I do use the word God every so often. I don't mind that word. If you mind that word, then replace with uni or whatever word for divine creator feels good for you. But this summer, especially with Chiron on my sun, I really was spiritualizing my consciousness, because Chiron is the wounded healer, and then the sun is your conscious self. And so having Chiron direct conjunct my sun was absolutely excruciating, but the surrender of my will to a divine will was really tough for me, because I was always like, well, I know what I want, and I have my ideas about what life is supposed to be and who I'm here to be with and what it needs to look like. And I feel like God universe was like, how has that worked out for you? Check your track record. So have a seat and listen. Have a seat and pull back on all the external validation, all the external interaction, and come home. Come home to yourself. So this summer, I had to go through like a withdrawal, so to speak. I mean, going through a breakup, it is, and not to say this was a breakup, but it was the end of something that I wanted. And instead, I found myself alone, and I found myself having to be completely with me. And I was pissed at first. And I went through a withdrawal of sorts, of just the disappointment and surrendering that what I thought was going to be happening was not going to be happening. And that level of pain just sent me into a deep, deep, deep healing relationship with myself. And it was just like my commitment to knowing who I am, not who I am when a man is attracted to me, not who I am when I'm someone's wife or a girlfriend or fiance, not who I am when I'm like desired, but who I am just as Natalia. Like, what is she about? What does she want? What matters to her? What are her values? What is she genuinely looking for from her life? What does she want? Who is she? Because if I look back on my life and my history with like my sexuality and with dating and with being interested in boys from like, middle school onward, having crushes when I was younger, it's like, I feel like my life has forever circumvented around men and guys and boys. And then when I was younger, I've talked about this before, my dad, he was a Scorpio. And although he was there and present, he was emotionally not what I truly would have wanted. And I'm recognizing that in a lot of the work that I'm doing on myself, some of my defects and the things that I like really just stumble on is wanting people to be a certain way so that I feel comfortable. And when I look back on my relationship with my dad, my mom fulfilled me emotionally. She knew how to meet me, and so did my grandmother and my grandfather, actually, on my maternal side. I was very close with them. If you guys have ever noticed the red-haired painting in some of my content, that was my grandmother. We were very, very close. She was a Spitfire. And my maternal line from my grandma, my grandpa, who they were divorced, and then my mom, they just knew how to meet me. And so I was very fulfilled through them, but it's like, who did I want love from? Like, I wanted love from my dad. I wanted to be met from him, and I wanted him to do it in a very specific way. I wanted him to love me in my love language. And while that is completely understandable, that's not what happened. And if I look at it from also a higher perspective, and not to bypass it, but just to honor from the soul and the esoteric lens, I know I chose my mom and dad. I know that I chose my dad to, like, I think he and I have loved one another for an eternity. And we were teachers to one another, because especially as he got older, I became very vocal with him about what I needed and what I required from him to have a relationship with me. And he was willing, and that I'm forever grateful to my dad for doing that for me. So even if I didn't have it when I was younger, it was very healing and nourishing, especially as I got older, and we figured it out towards the end. But what I will say, just to land this thought, is this time that I'm in right now of being alone, like even just clearing the deck completely, like no intriguing with guys, no one on the back burner, no one that I think I'm going to be dating or whatever. It's just like, I am completely with me. I am completely in my life. I'm completely with myself. I'm completely with my interests and my health and my body and my being. And that is a big deal for someone like me who has just always thought, especially having a South Node in Libra, I used to think when I was younger that my purpose for existing was literally to be so perfect that someone would want to marry me. That is a South Node in Libra for you. And I don't know if anyone who is in that nodal group can align with that, or maybe yours is shown up differently. But that was a genuine thought that I have had in my life, especially when I was younger. I was like, I just need to be so perfect that someone wants to keep me and take care of me. And I don't want to do it for myself. That was literally how I thought. And that's a very, let's say like that's a lower expression of a South Node in Libra. People pleasing is also a lower expression of a South Node in Libra. So stepping into my Aries stellium, and it's interesting, I did a tarot reading for myself, very in depth, towards the end of my nice dating experience that I had. There were a few that were a little rough, but the last one that I had was so beautiful, and it was actually quite enjoyable for me in certain ways, but I knew it wasn't going to continue. And I did a tarot reading about what the message was for me from my higher self. And the central card that I kept pulling was the Death card and the Emperor. And the Death card is like the ego getting ripped apart. Not fun, not fun. Ego deaths are very tough. That's also very Chiron on my sun. And then in addition, the Aries Emperor card, I was seeing as like my Aries stellium and like my Aries North Node, and just being in that energy and that essence of really like stepping into all of that. If you're a woman who makes money or wants to make more of it, but still feels overwhelmed, disconnected, or unsure how to actually lead your finances, I created Magical Women and Money just for you. MWMM is where money meets self-trust, strategy meets intuition, and women stop outsourcing their financial power. Inside, I teach you how to organize your finances, understand your faulty money habits, align your earning with your astrology, and build a real wealth for your future without shame, pressure, or feeling like you're behind. This is a personal finance meets astrology method that works. It's grounded, empowering money work for women that feels approachable and soulful. Join the waitlist for Magical Women and Money membership, MWMM. The link is in the show notes. And I asked ChatGPT one day, I was like, do Aries North Node people, I was in a weird moment, but I was like, do Aries North Node people like not get to get married? And Chat was like, no, Aries North Node people, of course, get married, but you have to like maintain your individuality and your independence in the context of that relationship. And I believe that to be very, very true. And in a certain way, I would say I experienced that in my first marriage and my first relationship. But I definitely, going back to what I was talking about partnering vision, that was an exercise that I did just recently where I was really working with the idea of like, what is my vision for a relationship? What do I want to give? And what do I want to receive? I feel like I've been someone in my life where I have performed for love. I think also a lot of women who have a father wound, that's a big thing where we think we need to be perfect. We think that we need to perform to get our needs met. And that was definitely, I felt true when I was younger, because my dad was also very much someone who he was very much like words were not his thing. He was just more of a quiet person. I think he was a triple water sign if I have done his birth chart calculations correctly, like a double Pisces, Scorpio sun, something like that, but super watery guy. And it's interesting because when you think, I don't know if any of you have like explored father wound stuff, but for women who have father wounds, we can think that love is conditional. And when I was young, that was like my dad's way of validating me and was really if I was doing well. Like it was almost like the only thing he knew how to relate to me on was like my actions, which is a very masculine thing because he definitely had that vibe of just like, if you were into what he was into, which I obviously wasn't, I was like a young girl. I didn't care about golf. I didn't care about sports. I didn't care about the markets. Like I just, of course, like it was just, we were speaking two different languages, but when I would achieve and I was great at dance and great at school or doing those things, then it's like, I would get that validation. And I think many of us, and this may be a bold thing to say, I think many of us have validation addiction. I think social media, I heard not long ago that if you want to, oh my gosh, who was this? It was a really prolific therapist. It was a reel that she posted from a podcast, but it was something like she was saying that the most successful enterprises in the world, they get people addicted to things. So social media has many of us, if not all of us on some level, addicted to validation. And I think that for me, in going straight into dating so quickly, I really recognized that the validation addiction was really strong because, as I mentioned towards the end of my relationship, and we were just dealing with such real life hard stuff. And it's like, while we were also likely reconciling that we were not in the right thing, but it was almost like opportunity cost. We didn't want to let go of what we had. That's so Capricorn rising. We both had Cap risings of us to say, but it's just like, it was like, we didn't want to let go of what we had already created, even if it wasn't the right thing. It was just like, what are we letting go of this for? And then of course, Mars retrograde through our seventh house of marriage. It was just forced essentially. So I'm going to land this episode, but I did want to talk a little bit about like what I'm seeing on Instagram. I watch a lot of reels and I'm curious because while I know that algorithms can become such an echo chamber, I've seen some interesting things where I feel like I'm really witnessing that the younger generations have so much more awareness again around the discernment piece and really witnessing behavior of the people that they're dating versus just letting it roll. Whereas I feel like for me in my dating history, what I've had to really reconcile and mature around, especially when I'm ready to date again, is really taking behavior as a fact, like not going with words, not going with projections of hope or like ignoring red flags or even ignoring yellow flags, but just really witnessing behavior. Like what is someone's behavior and also listening to what it is that they say and do those things align. For me, being heterosexual and like dating men, the content and the way the algorithm is serving me is really interesting because I see some content that I'm like, oh my God, where was this when I was in my 20s and dating? This is so empowering and it makes you really think as a woman to value yourself and make sure that you remember that like you have a choice in the matter. This isn't just, someone's choosing you and that's like an achievement. But I'll be honest, my loves, that is a huge, huge, huge program of mine that I have been disassembling, where it's just like, that's a wild thing to be programmed into you, where it's like, it is an achievement to get married and to be claimed by someone. But for me, I won't speak for anyone else. It was like, yeah, but does this relationship really make sense? What's the behavior? What are my values? Do our values align? What are our visions? I know when I move forward and I'm ready to date, that will be on a first date, my first question. What is your vision for your life? what are you here to do? Because if there's one thing I've noticed, again, looking at my history, is the men that couldn't answer that is like, for me personally, I don't see that as a healthy, good sign. What is your vision? What do you see for yourself? What do you want? And where are you going? I think that's very, very important. Another thing I will say, a little more on the negative side with Instagram is like a lot of the man hating. And I totally know, especially from my own experience, that there's some shitty people out there, and there's some shitty men out there, and there are people who have shitty behavior. But I think having a blanket statement around the entire male species, I don't know how helpful that is. And I also know very strongly that we have something called a reticular activating system, which is very, very heavily programmed based on our lived experiences. And I totally honor that for some, it's like that is a safe perspective to hold because it's protective. And I do my best not to feed into too much of that content when it comes my way, only because I've also experienced some absolutely remarkable, like, kind men with beautiful behavior and integrity. And I think instead of labeling all of the male species as one thing, label the behavior. And I was having a thought this morning just for some things that I have going on in my life where I'm just like, when people are hurt, they hurt others. And like, especially, I mean, I've definitely dated people who have like personality issues when I was younger. And at the time, you like don't know what hit you. And I feel like that is becoming now a really amazing conversation for young women of just like, by the way, these are important things to look out for, because when I was in my Saturn return and I dated someone with a personality issue, we weren't together for very long. I didn't know what hit me. And there's no awareness, there's no content. And so I know that there's shadow sides to how much content and like social media and the algorithms. But I will say from an empowerment perspective, if you can train your algorithm to give you the content that's empowering and helps you with your discernment and your awareness, I think that that's really important. And I even commented on a woman's reel recently where I just said, you know what? I'm so impressed by this. Like, it was definitely an intense perspective, but I said, you know what? Because, people have the hooks, especially because social media is so noisy. Sometimes people's hooks are so gnarly, but if you just like go into it, you can really hear their perspective and the intelligence of the perspective that goes way beyond, just the hook. And I even commented on her post where I said, listen, I wish that when I was quote unquote dating in LA in my 20s, that this kind of information was available. It would have saved me a lot of heartache. It would have saved me a lot of time just to have more of this conversation being involved in the culture. And it just wasn't back then. So I would say my biggest lesson, now being alone and just being with myself, it's so nice. Like, I know that my deeper vision is I want a healthy, amazing partner, and I would love to have a family. If that is God universe's plan for my life, I surrender my plan. I do my work and I do my healing. And I didn't get to talk about EMDR, but especially over the summer when I was first just really committing to my aloneness, I was with my therapist doing EMDR pretty much every week, every other Saturday. And I will say that really helped downregulate a lot of the anxiety that I had picked up from just my past dating experiences, dating in Los Angeles, and then also any kind of like pick me energy that I think that father wound can really exacerbate. So the EMDR was really helpful for the nervous system. Not sure if you babes have done it, but it's done wonders for me. And then now just being in this space and being able to really explore, okay, like what What have I learned? Like, what has dating after divorce taught me? And it's really to go slow and to be discerning, like ask questions, listen, don't get caught up in the romance or the physicality too quickly, especially for women. And I know this might be you, obvious. I mean, you can do whatever you please, of course, but my perspective, especially going through all the things that I've gone through in my life journey, I will say moving forward, that piece of it for me will be I will only be available physically for someone that I'm with, that I'm in a committed relationship with. The kissing, the romance, the physicality, what I found is if that happens too quickly, this is gonna sound funny, but it's like you can hitch your wagon to the wrong person. You know what I mean? Because we are like, we're very primal and we're here to procreate. That's just at a primal level. Not all of us are here to procreate by choice, but it's like chemically we bond. And I've been learning also about like the difference of like oxytocin versus vasopressin. This is again what I've been learning over on good old IG and one of my coaches that I was working with this year as well. But it was interesting. Oxytocin, we bond through, physicality. We bond through sex. Men don't bond through that. Men bond through keeping commitments and working for things. So that might be a grossly simplified expression of that. And again, I'm definitely not any kind of expert, but I will say that just from going through my own heartache and my own confusion and not choosing the right kind of people for me in the past and really wiping the slate clean and being able to really explore who is right for me, what are my values, what makes sense, because I believe very strongly that when you're getting to know someone, they will show you through their behaviors and your body will also communicate. That's another thing for women. I think that it's so important for us to like listen and to be connected to our truth through our body and intuition. And I think the only way that we can do that is through healing and through really, really deep spiritual self-care and connectivity. So go slow, be discerning. For me personally, holding off on the romance piece for as long as possible. And it's not because that isn't fun, but I'm like, wow, what would it be like to have like connectivity of romance with someone that actually feels like a true partner and someone who really honors me versus just like moving quickly. And then you're like trying to put all these pieces together to see if you actually make sense together. And again, this is just, I'm in a little bit of a unique position and I'm only speaking this for my own life and my own experience because this has been hard fought and very painful, but it's like, I kind of got a second chance just to see and essentially experiment with being who I am now and then exploring this part of my life in a completely different way than I ever have before. So I feel like for my, very soon I'm going to be turning 39 and we will just see what the universe's plan is for my life. I'm doing my footwork. I'm doing my healing. I'm really cultivating a relationship of respect and connectivity to myself. And that's all that I can ask for. And then I go slow and I am in my healthy discernment when it is time for me to date again. And I don't know when that will be. I don't know when I'll be ready for that, but maybe soon. I have a feeling this year, 100%. Plus like I said, I would love, for me, it's like partner first. And then I would like to have a family if it makes sense, if I can, if we can, the whole thing. But it's like, for me, it's like partner first. And like, are you someone I would genuinely want to create a life with and move forward? And because it's hard, it is tough. I mean, it's gorgeous and it's rewarding. And I know people in healthy relationships, but even the healthiest relationships are freaking tough. They are not always easy. You're going to meet your shadows in one another, and you're going to meet tough moments, and you're going to have to navigate them. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Definitely went in a lot of different directions, but I'd love to hear from you over on the Grammy Poo. So you can DM me at Natalia_Benson. I love you so much. Thank you for tuning in. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.